you to come back home.
Happy Easter, everybody. Yes, that's right. It's Easter Day. I had in fact hoped to film this video yesterday because my topic for today is going to be the harrowing of hell. And you're thinking, what on earth is he talking about? Well, all will soon become clear. I don't think I have any notices for this week, except to say that I've got a new alarm clock because the clock stopped. I don't know if I told you this before, but last week the clock stopped Saturday, and because it stopped I was late for work. So I changed the battery and the clock stopped again at exactly the same time this Saturday. New battery, everything. So I've got rid of the clock, I've got a completely new clock, completely new batteries, and let's hope things go okay from now. I have to say though that this time when it happened I was obviously more in the work mind frame because I woke up with plenty of time to get to work despite the alarm clock not working. You ought to know also that I am launching several new projects shortly. I'm keeping... I'm going to say more about them later. So now I'm going to move on to the harrowing of hell, and that is a theory about what happened on Easter Saturday. You know, technically speaking, Christ did not die, spend 3 days dead, and then come back to life. And that's not what it was said that he was going to do. He was going to rise on the third day. Now, the 3 days are called the Trideum, 3 days, it's Latin. And they are Friday, Saturday, Sunday. Now, one must remember a few things here. The first day includes the crucifixion, so Christ hasn't died until the middle of the afternoon on the first day, and he rises around dawn on the third day. So he's only, technically speaking, dead between Friday night and Sunday morning. So what happens on Saturday? Well, I want to first say what happens in the temporal world. So at the time, there was a little bit of a fuss because Christ's execution happened very, very close to the Passover, and as you may know, the Jews are not allowed to do work on the Sabbath. And whilst Christ was already dead, they had to hurry along the end of the execution because they needed to take the bodies down, put them in tombs, and shut everything down, ready for nightfall on that day, because then it was the Passover, and nobody could do anything during that day. So technically speaking, it was the Passover that Christ was dead for, if you want to put it like that. And whether you think that that means that the harrowing of hell took place on the Friday night and then Christ just rested for a day is up to you. Theologically, it's quite symbolically nice to think that. And that's sort of one of the things that I think. I think this was probably a very quick thing. Absolutely key, but a quick thing. Anyway, so the Jews did nothing on the Saturday. They probably hid if they were had or been known to be friendly with Christ. And they did nothing apart from worry, I would imagine, and be a bit upset because they thought he was dead, he was gone. All hope was lost. It wasn't until Sunday that they were allowed to then tend to the body that had already been sort of shoved in the tomb, shot very quickly, etc., etc. Hasten to add that Christ didn't have his own tomb, so it was given to him by somebody else. But that is beside the point. So what do we do today to mark it? Well, it's funny, isn't it? Because it's a horrible day if you happen to work in the church. There are no masses, or rather it's worse than that. The masses start but then they are unable to go on beyond the peace, because beyond the peace you go into the Eucharistic prayer, and you can't have a Eucharistic prayer without without Christ, and as Christ is dead at that point in chronology, the service just stops and people just sort of go. All the altars are stripped bare. There's no cloths. There's no particular ornamentations. A lot of them are covered or removed completely. It is the one day, I suppose, that belongs to the devil in terms of there being no hope, because as far as Christians in chronology at that point are concerned, it's failed, okay? Because they failed to grasp what had to happen in order for them to succeed. So that explains what we do at the moment and what happened in the temporal realm. But we are more interested in what Christ did on that day. Now, there are two very different thoughts to this. The first thought is the official sort of harrowing of hell theology, I suppose. It is what is generally tended to be asserted to by the Roman Catholics. Technically speaking, they do not know what happened on the Saturday, but they have taken a single Petrine verse, like they took a single Pauline verse, and turned it into apostolic succession by making a huge assumption. You know, it was said that Peter would have the gates to heaven and hell, which is fine, but it didn't say that all of Peter's successors would have the same thing. And the great assumption in the Roman Catholic Church is that those keys are passed along. And they've made another great assumption here when it sort of says, there's a single verse that says that Christ sort of talked to and freed the spirits in bondage, and they've taken that very much to mean that Christ went to the dead, and that is not to say he went to hell. Although they say that he descended to the inferno, what they really mean is he ascended to the place where people are when they are dead. It's a rather Hellenistic idea that there are different types of hell. You know, there is the sort of bit where you're dead, there's the bit where you're judged, there's the bit where you go after you're judged, etc., etc. And they all have different words in the Greek. You know, Hades is not the same as Sheol, for example, although they both mean sort of dead and gone. One of them is sort of hanging around, only just dead, and one of them is we've been taken to a very nasty place, that sort of thing. So in this respect, they have taken that idea and run with it and turned it into purgatory. So Christ has gone to the dead, and he's gone preaching to those who are already dead, okay, and they then have to do good works, or they have to, other people can do good works, and because Peter has the keys to heaven and hell, he can remove people from one position and put them in another, because they're technically speaking not judged yet, so they're neither in heaven or hell, they're in the place of the dead, which is purgatory. And that's a completely fabricated idea based on this sort of story, on this one little passage, which is taken completely out of context and made as a huge assumption. And it's generally been the downfall of the Roman Catholic Church, because the two together have made the Roman Church extremely powerful, because supposedly there is a way of saving those people who have been bad and not Christian in death, and Peter or his successor is the only one who can help you. Ha ha! Talk about corruption. So that's what they believe. My theology is slightly different, and it's a little bit naughty, because some people find it a bit offensive, because in order, I think, for salvation to occur, Christ has to go through with the payment. the idea is that God can unify something that is imperfect with something that is perfect. That can't happen unless the imperfect is punished, because then it can be sort of made pure if it's still around. And so something or somebody has to be punished for everybody. And the only person capable of doing that is himself. So what he basically does is he chops part of himself up, if you like, in order to pay the debt himself, so that he can unify the imperfect with the perfect. Hell, for a start, is a place in the eternal realm which is almost non-existent in itself, because it's a place without God. And as God is the sustaining force in everything, there's nothing in hell. So it's not particularly horrible. It's not particularly, it's not filled with any sort of fire or anything like that. It's just a complete vacuum, I suppose. It's a complete absence of anything that is life-sustaining. The only things there are those that are cast there, and they, I guess, just float around in nothingness most of the time. You'll notice that most of the evil spirits don't spend their time in hell. They spend their time on the temporal realm, trying to corrupt people that they can send there. So there we are. And because it's a place without because it's a place without God, if God were to enter it, it would cease to exist, because it's defined, its whole definition is the fact that God is not there. So if God were to go into hell, it would destroy hell. The problem is that means that God has to go to hell. And so I am saying, yes, Jesus dies, Jesus is judged, and despite the fact he's God, he's judged by God. He's sent to hell for all the bad things that we have done, and he has to go into hell for that to happen. And, that means that for a brief while, the Trinity is broken. There is three personalities within the one Trinity, and one of them has been not excommunicated, but I guess excommunicated. There is no connection between them. So it must be pretty brief. It must be pretty brief, I think. It must be a split second at which Christ is judged, the Trinity is broken, Christ goes to hell. As he enters hell, hell is destroyed because of who he is, and then he is reunified. Because then, of course, hell doesn't exist, and everywhere is God, so God is one again. It's a little hard to explain. It borders on being offensive to some people, but that is what I think has happened. And so, after that, yes, he rises again. But he rises in a body which is not his original. It's not his pre-death body, and it's not his eternal body either. It's sort of like a resurrectional body, which is a little bit different, and that is why eventually, after Eastertide, he ascends, and he goes back to heaven on a cloud. And I think I've said quite enough. I've probably confused everybody. It's probably going to be a huge, long blog that nobody wants to watch, but I don't care. I will do the birthdays, and then that will be the end of me for a few days. So fabulous people have their birthdays this week. We start with Fiona, who had her birthday last week, and I sort of knew about it because it was in my diary, but it didn't come up on Facebook, so I didn't mention it, so I'm mentioning it now. As well as that, we have Miss Jen, fantastic, Mark Dunn, both people that I knew from forums, Dan Downs, a fighter, Victoria Ireland, Michelle Fisher, Stuart Nichol, who was my boss at one point in time, and Matt Pena. So happy birthday to all of those. I hope they have a great Easter, great birthdays, and of course, eat lots of cake.